It started innocently enough. Steph had never been one to spend much time on her phone. In fact, she barely used it except for the occasional call or text, so when I noticed her glued to the screen more often, it felt strange. She would smile, laugh, or even blush when a message popped up, and her fingers danced excitedly over the keys as she replied. That was when I first felt something off. I wanted to brush it off. Maybe she was just reconnecting with old friends or finding new interests online, but the nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach wouldn't let go. She'd never been so secretive, always so open, but now her phone was never out of reach. She even started keeping it under her pillow at night. That old smile, the one she used to have for me, was now directed at her screen. Something was wrong. The suspicion of her cheating gnawed at me, and though I didn't want to believe it, the signs were all there. One night, while she was on the couch scrolling through her messages, I decided to get a closer look. I approached her quietly, acting casual, but what I saw on her phone made my blood run cold. It wasn't what I expected at all. There was no romantic exchange, no flirtatious texts. Instead, there was a picture. At first, I thought it was some sort of horror movie screenshot, but as I took a closer look, I realized it was worse, so much worse. The picture showed a man, dismembered, his limbs strewn across a concrete floor, his torso split open like a butchered animal, and his hollow chest cavity laid bare. His head, severed and lying a few feet away, still had its eyes in place, staring blankly. I froze, trying to make sense of it. The image was horrifying, but what was more terrifying was Steph's reaction. She giggled. A soft, almost innocent laugh as if she were sharing a joke with someone. Then she typed her response, "Cute. I love how you left the eyes in the head this time." I was speechless. My mind raced, trying to process what was happening. Steph sent the message, biting her lip in anticipation for the reply. Almost immediately, 3 dots appeared, and the response came. "I was saving them for you, winking face." She let out a little squeal of excitement and quickly typed back, "When can I come down?" That's when my heart truly sank. She wasn't just observing. She was part of it. I felt my stomach churn, and I didn't know if I was about to scream, cry, or vomit. I couldn't hold it back any longer. "Steph," I said, barely able to keep my voice steady. She spun around, glaring at me with a look of fury I'd never seen on her face before. "What are you doing?" she snapped, pulling the phone to her chest like a shield. Her voice was ice cold, dripping with anger. "How dare you spy on me?" I was too stunned to speak. The image of that body still burned in my mind, and her joyful reaction was so twisted, so unnatural. "You're unbelievable," she spat, standing up abruptly. "You invade my privacy, and for what? You don't trust me? You're disgusting." She raised her hand, and before I could react, her palm connected with my face. The force of the slap stung, but it wasn't the pain that got to me. It was the rage in her eyes, the hate I saw simmering there, that terrified me more than anything. She stormed off, retreating into the bedroom and slamming the door behind her. I was left alone in the living room, my cheek burning, my mind racing. What had I just witnessed? What was Steph involved in? I spent the next hour pacing, trying to calm myself down. Part of me wanted to believe it was some sick prank, or maybe I had imagined it. But the memory of that grotesque image wouldn't let me forget. I couldn't shake the feeling that something much darker was going on. Later that night, long after Steph had gone to bed, I made up my mind. I needed answers. I crept into the bedroom, moving as quietly as possible so I wouldn't wake her. The dim glow of her phone was still visible on the nightstand. I reached out and carefully took it, my hands shaking as I unlocked it. I opened the message thread, praying that what I had seen earlier was some horrible misunderstanding. But the conversation was still there, Steph's giggling texts, the gruesome images, the flirtatious replies. The contact was saved under a demon emoji, just a single red face. But when I scrolled further, I saw something that chilled me to the core. The number sending these messages was Steph's own phone number. What the hell? I whispered under my breath. How is this possible? She was texting herself? My mind raced, replaying the earlier events in my head, but I distinctly remembered those 3 dots, the ones that indicated someone was typing back. Steph's fingers had been still. Before I could make sense of it, the screen buzzed in my hand. Another message appeared. Are you scared? I could feel my heart pounding, the room growing colder by the second. The air felt thick, suffocating. Just then, Steph stirred under the covers, her body jerking in strange, sudden movements. I froze, staring at her as she began to thrash more violently, her limbs flailing in the bed. Steph? I whispered, but she didn't respond. Steph? I said again, my voice trembling now. I took a cautious step toward the bed and slowly reached for the blanket, pulling it back to see her face. What I saw wasn't Steph. It was the man from the photos, the dismembered, mutilated man. He was lying right there in my bed, his head twisted at an unnatural angle, a hideous grin spread across his face. His body, broken and torn, lay just as it had in the image, his empty chest cavity exposed, his limbs grotesquely scattered. I stumbled back, my mind spinning. How is this happening? Suddenly, a low, maniacal laugh filled the room, echoing from beneath the bed. I turned, horrified, as a hand shot out from the darkness and grabbed my ankle, yanking me toward the floor. I gasped, kicking at the hand, and saw Steph crawl out from under the bed, her eyes glowing with a wild, unhinged fury. Her teeth were sharper now, filed down to points, and she grinned at me with a twisted smile. I told you to stay out of it, she growled, her voice barely human. Her nails dug into my leg, drawing blood, and she pulled herself up, her face inches from mine. I kicked her away, scrambling back, my heart pounding in terror. You shouldn't have done that, she hissed, her voice dripping with malice. Steph, What's going on?" I begged, desperate for answers, but she only sneered at me, her eyes filled with a dark, unnatural hunger. "He's coming for you," she said, her voice low and cold. My breath caught in my throat. "Who?" I stammered, my mind racing. "Who's coming?" Steph didn't answer. Instead, she glanced toward the door, and my blood turned to ice. A figure stood in the doorway, a tall, shadowy figure with hooved feet and a grotesque, twisted face. It looked like something straight out of a nightmare, its eyes glowing red in the darkness. It was the face from the demon emoji on Steph's phone. But this thing wasn't just a cartoonish representation. It was real, and it was terrifying. The creature's mouth twisted into a grin as it stepped into the room, its clawed hands reaching out toward me. I backed away, trembling, as it loomed closer. Steph crawled toward it, her body moving in jerky, unnatural motions. She wrapped her arms around its legs, gazing up at it with a sickening adoration. The creature looked down at her, then back at me, its grin widening. It spoke in a low, guttural voice, the words foreign and unrecognizable. "Ego tika magam postia." Steph chuckled, her eyes gleaming. "He says he'll be back for you." With that, the creature lifted her up, carrying her effortlessly over its shoulder. She giggled, clinging to it as it turned and disappeared into the shadows of the hallway, leaving me alone in the room with the mangled body of the man on the bed. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to move or think. The room felt like it was spinning, the walls closing in on me. I sat there in silence for what felt like hours, trying to make sense of what had just happened. By morning, the house was eerily quiet. I finally gathered the courage to search the house, but Steph was gone. Her clothes, her belongings, everything had disappeared, as if she had never existed. Even the photos on the walls had changed. Where once there had been pictures of us together, now there were only pictures of me, alone. But the body in the bed was still there, a grotesque reminder of the horror I had witnessed. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't call the police, not with this, not with a story that no one would ever believe. In a daze, I wrapped the body in an old rug and dragged it out to the backyard, burying it under a tree. I didn't know what else to,